All right. We are good to go. Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for being here tonight. This is the February 2025 NAWP reading. On the, never look at the chat when you're introducing. On the off chance none of you or any of you have not been to a NAWP event before or unfamiliar with NAWP, I'll give you the little background. I try to do this every time. I am Mitch Nobis. I am your host for the night, and I am one of the co-founders of NAWP, which stands for Not at AWP, because for several years, back when Twitter was cool and functional, and I'm not going to say not full of Nazis, because there were always some unsavory types, but far less full of Nazis. It was a fun place, and we used to make jokes. I'm a teacher. Many people in this room are teachers. So I couldn't really just get away to AWP. And instead I would make dumb Twitter jokes saying I was attending not at AWP while I was like doing laundry and things. And then Jared Beloff, the other co-founder of NAWP, said we should actually make NAWP a thing. And so here we are. We made it a thing. So thank you all for coming to our February event. I am thrilled about this because these are two of my favorite poets, and they're also old friends. So I love getting them together in a virtual room whenever possible, right? So we will get to it, and thank you all also for taking time on this fine. I was gonna call it Super Bowl Monday on this post Kendrick killing it Monday. We'll go with that. Um, I've been fascinated by the responses to that online, man. Like some people got it and some people didn't. Anyways, thank you all for being here tonight. I'm Mitch Novus. I am your host. Joining us are Ajanae Dawkins and Brittany Rogers. Like I said, two fantastic poets and Detroiters as well. Also, one of my favorite things to highlight is Michigan and Detroit writers. We are going to follow kind of the usual NOP agenda, whatever protocol. Well, I'll do a little intro, and then we usually just go in alphabetical order, which I guess would be Ajanae first. Does that work for you, Ajanae and Brittany, or we good? All right, so well, Ajanae kick us off. She'll read us some poems, and then Brittany will read us some poems, and then we'll do a little Q&A. So if you're in the audience and as you're listening, anything pops up or you're wondering anything, hold on to those thoughts. Feel free to chime in later with a question. And the chat should be open to everybody, so feel free to drop questions and comments and oohs and ahs and all that good stuff in there. All right, so let's see here. I said Ajanae is first, so let me intro Ajanae Dawkins for you all. Pull up the bio here. All right, Ajanae is a poet, conceptual artist, and theologian. She works through poetry, visual art, performance, and audio to explore the politics of faith, grief, and intimate relationships between Black women. As a theologian, she blends cultural criticism, memoir, and theology as auto theory to consider the relationship between Black church history, spirituality, and creation. Her work has appeared in the Academy of American Poets, Poem a Day, The Rumpus, Prairie Schooner, the Indiana Review, Frontier Poetry, the Breakbeat Poets, Black Girl Magic Anthology, and more. Her solo exhibition, No One Teaches Us How to Be Daughters, debuted at Urban Art Space in 2024, and according to the photos I saw online, looked really cool. Her chapbook, Bloodflex, won the New Delta Review's Chapbook Prize and is forthcoming in spring 2025. Ajanae, let's throw the microphone over to you and share some of your wonderful words with us, if you would, please.
Hi, okay, sorry. Trying to find the unmute button is always a thing. Um Thank you so much, Mitch. I really appreciate the invitation. I am as somebody who was watching AWP online and it wasn't even the first year I thought I was gonna make it to AWP. It was the first year we thought Brittany was gonna make it to AWP, which then ended up being the COVID year, which was a disaster. The not AWP resource is critical and vital. So um just yeah, really grateful for all of the space that you have created. Um and grateful to be here with Brittany, who, if you know anything about me, you know I love her real, real bad, and is very, very serious. Okay, cool. I'm gonna read some poems, and then I'm gonna pass it over to my brilliant best friend. Um, we've been doing Zoom readings for years now, and I still like get the slam impulse to be like, if that's cool, say cool. Um, so here we go. I am going to read some work from my chapbook. Um, yeah, my chapbook looks at Black mother-daughter relationships in some ways through my own relationship with my mother. And it's navigating ideas of Black girlhood. Um, and I'll just move into a handful of readings because I don't know how much talking I'm gonna do between poems, but it's called Blood Flecks. And this is the author's note. Author's note. What new could I say about something damn near old as God? What could I truly imagine that hadn't been felt before? Just 'cause I had a revelation of self and consequently the multitudinous nature of womanhood. Certainly, the way I have loved my mother is not innovative. Certainly, my sudden awareness of her personhood was not a stroke of brilliance. Certainly, my near fatal realization that my freedom was tied to hers did not make me anything more than an ordinary daughter who'd been subjected to the world. No one will again love me this way, unconditionally, fiercely, and with complication for my whole life. That's what Black women writers before me knew when they penned double stitch, mother love, teaching my mother how to give birth, girl, mom and me and mom, etc. They tried to tell my hard-headed ass. Rita Dove, Audre Lorde, Sonia Sanchez, June Jordan, Aja Monet, Maya Angelou, Jamaica Kincaid, Warsan Shire, and so on. So why would I feign singularity against this inheritance? Some lessons come slowly, surely, for those of us who had to learn the hard way that we don't know everything. I've been mothered in so many ways. Oh, Eve, I could never hate you. You were created with a cursed half-life. Only woman in existence without a mother. Without girlhood to cling to. What a terrifying, lonely world it must have been. To emerge from a man grown with no memory of your growing. To look in the mirror and see only self. To become a mother with no reference. Daughter bucking out of you, sticky slick as a serpent covered in fig. It's enough to make anyone question the truth of their becoming. How did you do it? Cain and Abel came and Adam knew to imitate God's absence. Eve, what taught you to mother? The garden, ground, olive trees, the night studded with stars like gold teeth, the widow spires, court scorpions, strawberry poison, arrow frogs, the ocean, river, bayou, postpartum, when no mother surrounded you. Did you drink your own milk? Were you surprised by the blood? Who dressed your wounds? All right. Um, Actually, I'm not going to talk because the poem I thought I was going to do, I'm going to switch the direction. Heartsick Sonnet number 3. Here is a universal tradition. First pregnancy scare. A knife of silence traces my chin, stops at the vein singing loudest from my neck. Plan B grazes my impulse and in love on the way down. My mother knew the boy would leave before I did. The pill did what it promised. He called 2 weeks later to be sure. When a mother is born, a second set of arms sprout from her body. Who else could hold a girl child splintering from the heartbreak of first love? The heartbreak of my mother being right about the first of many men, right about me, my naive, dumb love. Damn her knowing. Um, Truly nothing is more devastating than than realizing your mom was right about something. Like, especially something that you fought her vehemently on. Brittany knows this. I hate being wrong. Like when I have to apologize, when I have to acknowledge that I'm wrong, I'm all for accountability. So I'm gonna do it. Brittany will tell you, I'm gonna do it, but like on the verge of vomiting, right? And so when it's my mom who, as Audre Lorde said, like who I fought against her, and then it turns out she's sick to my stomach. Sick to my stomach. Like, I can't believe you actually did know something about this world. You who have lived so many years before me. Um, okay, so I had the, you know, beautiful and somewhat traumatizing experience of watching my baby sister be born. Um, I don't even know how to rank that if I recommend it. I I had never seen anybody go into labor or give birth, and uh, it made me think a lot about the work of miracles, right? And what feels like this very miraculous event that um, doesn't feel that miraculous in the moment of watching because it's muddied by all the really like gross human things of the body, right? Um, and uh, but I I was almost 18 when my mom had my second sibling, and I think about it every time I think about my own desires for motherhood. So this is how to witness a miracle without converting. My mother swapped prayer for sharp screams when my sister crowned. The epidural settled on one side until the nerves in her left hip became stars, dying down the dark of her thigh. At 17, I watched a girl child emerge covered in only God can name. Maybe bloodlight, star vein, water sky. A boneless sea creature who knows something about the universe sitting next to ours. I don't want to go back, nor do I want to die this way, making daughters. My body has a tenure of chaos and blood. Its clotting and ache began at the edge of girlhood. I see no way out. Um, Thank you. I don't know if anybody else here has like the family who really likes to hold on to secrets. Like they're like, nobody's gonna know any of our business. And so you're piecemealing information together. Um uh yes, my body has a tenure of chaos and blood. Thank you. Um Yeah, piecemealing information together. But the best time to get like the tea, to get the information is when people are on their deathbeds, because something about like the end coming in close, I don't know, people just start getting reckless, they start speaking. So, unfortunately that is has crept on us in a multitude of ways. So I've been thinking about um the hope or want to navigate the truth versus like the positions that people are in when they finally begin telling us the truths in my family. So this is called Homegoings Make Us Testifiers. Here is a universal tradition. By age or compulsion, we confess. In the hospital, on the way to the store, over eggs spilling their easy centers, the locks on our tongues dissolve. We share where our bodies been, what men we left, women we tried, compare notes on critical blood gossip to be sure the trees filled outright. We fuss too many damn secrets in this family. But no matter, we love the women who kept them. We miss their lies. We justify times were different back then. We don't care what our dead did to stay alive. We spill air and swear to divorce silence. Mm. Thank you. Okay. I'm gonna do um I'll do one more poem and then I will pass. I think this might be like the longest poem in the book because the book is full of shorter girlies. And so I'll do one more poem and then I'm gonna pass the torch to Brittany, the love of my life, the beautiful baddie who blessed us with good dress. Um, this poem is called Of Age. One, I was harassed, first by my family's eyes, noticing what I wasn't aware of. A rounding here, softening, hardening, growing whistle sharp. They announced a change whenever I entered a room, breast, hip, thigh, getting grown, getting womanly, womanish, fast, tailing women. Then the boys, hallway chasers, fervently learning to unhook a bra between two fingers turned ragged metal, turned razor snickering in my back, then my body betrayed itself. My singing blood, its shrill and wanting voice I hissed over. I said stop, but could feel the pulse between my legs. Two, in seventh grade, I was temporarily banned from the local skating rink for kissing a boy on the air hockey table. Me sat on the game's boundary. Shout out to Skate World in Troy, Michigan. Okay, me sat on the game's boundary, puck beneath my nails, skates stunted to useless ankle weights, eighth grade boy from a city over nudged between my thighs, hormones so new they shone like pearls. I'd been given the talk. What's given, what determines what's given instead of mutually engaged? Theory prepares you for desire as much as it prepares you for war. My family was multi-generational home, suburb migration from Highland Park, from Brooklyn, a church building we owned. What could I know of hunger? 3, being 12 and fast is a leprous felony. Ask me now if I care who slung hoe at me like clotted mud. What mother told her daughters I would taint their name? Growing a new body overnight is dizzying. Waking with new breasts feel like the first time you wield a gun. With my mind, it's a risk to keep one in the house, even to protect me from what our country has made of men. But damn, I can imagine the fear, the power, this new extension of yourself capable of something biblical. It's enough to make anyone reckless as God. For who is galloping through my blood? Who is whispering for all the ways the flesh will fail? Still, I made you like this. Who is blooming at the mouth? 5, quiet starlight God. Pulse warm harvest God. Oh, God of the body, of daughters who learn to shield themselves, God of loneliness, God of love in the middle of rebellion, God who strikes down weeds that threaten the field, and still God of the weeds, God who watches our queries, growing tall as delphinium or sky, and speaks our names into the wind. Okay, and I'm muting because the love of my life is getting ready to speak. Okay, bye.
That was that was amazing. That was amazing. Amazing. Thank you so much, Ajanae. I cannot wait for you. Like I'll be fast, Brittany. Like, I can't wait for your chat book. Like your language is so rich and gorgeous. Like I need to read and reread. Like I need this thing in my hands. So
Yeah.
I'm excited that it's on the way. I also owe you an apology. I realized I didn't read your entire bio before I tossed it over to you. So there was more stuff.
Please don't.
I know that feeling. I know. I don't always even do the bios because like I don't like I, I don't know. Like sometimes it's like I don't want to hear all this stuff about me before I read, you know. But sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I figured I would do them for you too. So all right. Well, anyways, thank you very much. We will get it over to Brittany here.
Yes.
And one thing I did drop in the chat. I should have definitely mentioned up front for those of you who aren't familiar with Ajanae and Brittany's work, they're also not only the old friends, but they're also the co-hosts of the Versus podcast through the Poetry Foundation, which is just a fantastic, fantastic podcast. If you don't know it, you should absolutely check it out. They are they're great hosts, but they're also a hoot because like they're old friends, you know. So it's one of my favorite podcasts. As my kids would say, no cap. All right, Brittany, let's get your bio up here. Brittany Rogers is a poet, visual artist, essayist, high school teacher, one of my favorite tidbits in the bio, and lifelong Detroiter. Audacity is the overarching concept that activates her creative process. As a Black queer femme, Brittany is fascinated by the boldness and risk-taking that daily survival necessitates. As such, her explorations of audacity often lead to an interrogation of the connections between the audacity of Black women and pleasure, longing, autonomy, the erotic, adornment, coming of age, and matrilineage. On that note, no surprise to you, Brittany, because I've told you this before, but I just shared one of your Ice Cam poems in a different group the other day. Love those. As a whole, Brittany's creative work pokes at the notions of respectability, ownership, beauty, and obligation, and is constantly looking to subvert the heteronormative and patriarchal expectations that are placed upon Black femmes. She has work published or forthcoming in Prairie Schooner, Apogee, Indiana Review, Four-Way Review, Underbelly, Mississippi Review, The Metro Times, The Breakbeat Poets, Black Girl Magic, Obsidian Literature and Arts in the African Diaspora, Lambda Literary, and Oprah Daily. She is editor-in-chief of Muslim Magazine and co-host of Versus Podcast. Her debut collection, Good Dress, is no longer forthcoming. Got to update the website. Her debut collection, Good Dress, is out from Tin House Press and is absolutely amazing. I'll drop that link in the chat here in just a minute. All right, Brittany, floor is yours.
Thank you. And thank you all for being here. This is so cool to see folks in the Zoom room on a Monday, on a Monday evening at that. I appreciate it. I also am always, always, always thrilled to read with Ajanae. You would think that after all this time, we would be sick of this. Like you would think that, but you would be wrong. You would be wrong. There is nothing better than the joy of like being in awe at someone that you've been in love with for forever, like every time, still, best feeling in the world. So, um, Thank you, Mitch, for having the both of us here. Oh, same, same. Really watching me and Ajanae read together is just watching us exchange our love yous back and forth across the screen. So sorry, y'all. I hate to. We're that awkward couple at the mall that you're like, oh my God, can they get a room already? Can they just go away?
Every time.
So thank you all also for putting up with our shenanigans. Um, Mitch, since you mentioned the ice cams, I might start with one of those. Um, I'm gonna read some poems from Good Dress, and then I'm gonna read a couple new poems. I've been trying to make it a practice to read new poems at every reading that I do lately. Keeps me vulnerable, keeps me honest. So, Ice Cam, Little Caesars Arena, January 2022. That Pistons ice cam is some of the wildest shit I've ever seen. Do they not rob niggas in Detroit? I would cover my face and run if there was ever an ice cam in redacted Twitter user. When the ice cam turns wide-eyed toward our section, we do what we must. Curl a thumb under the Cuban link and lift high as praise. No one is untouchable, not even you, pleading for us to quiet our jewels cackling throughout the stadium. Strip bare our pinkies, wrists, chest, for whose gaze? Those thirsty for our throats and what they take to be wealth. Your problem is our nerve, thick as tobacco smoke. You wish we'd get rid of it. We know. We know. The gold is just a cover. And while I'm flipping to my next poem, I just want to say for context, the ice cam is what plays at our Pistons games. And instead of like hissing when the camera sees you, you lift up your jewelry. And it's one of my favorite things in the world because it's the most Detroit shit ever. Um, I love that Detroiters are extravagant and are lavish and unruly and uncompromising. All of those things are my favorite. So this next poem is called Hunting Hours. I walked everywhere that summer, and everywhere there were men making a game of their lust. The chorus of catcalls licked my back as I passed by, hips tender, swaying like two tall grass. Fooled them. Most girls shy away. I glutton. I devour. I do not wait to be made a meal of. I pluck the first boy from his porch, then the next, and him too. I left, hands stuffed with their strands of hair, Hickey's red ants lining my neck. There was no one at home to ask how or why I would do such an unladylike things. Don't you see? No one took me this time. Um, okay. So in the book, there are like several poem series, but one of them is like a series of therapy documents, if you will. So they're and they take the form of medical forms and documents. And this one is called Progress Notes. Week of redacted. The patient pops off every session, has yet to soothe her hot head, tender her slick lips. Every day a blow up. She checks her seat for blood. It is always a wound with this one. Can't get to the cut with all that wet around it. I prescribe antidepressants, stimulants, redirection. Picture your happy place. I believe she has abandoned her plan for treatment. She stands to leave and springs a leak. Before she makes it to the door, a new trail of red. Um, just for clarity's sake, I hate those damn therapy papers. Nothing gets on my nerves more than being asked dumb things. Things like, um, do you feel anxious? Sometimes, nearly all the time, every day. A few days a week, like all the time. But look at the world. How often do you think I feel anxious? Like it's very, the questions all feel very redundant to me because obviously I'm stressed. Life is stressful. So, the poems in that series are kind of making a mockery of that. And and that like I'll read one of the other ones that I never read because it looks like this. Can y'all see that? Hmm. Okay, so I'm just gonna say that the rating scale is never, rarely, sometimes, most days, and nearly every day. And hopefully y'all not treated this the way that I am, but if you are, then that sounds real familiar to you. Um, and the poem is called Select the Most Appropriate Answer. Considering the last 4 weeks, how often have you been interested in your usual hobbies or activities? Felt down, tired, or exhausted? Been unable to complete the responsibilities of your job as a result of feeling down, tired, or exhausted? Practice self-care, a bubble bath or kid-free errand. Been so exhausted or sad that your spouse or children have seen you cry. Spent money you did not have on a material item that you did not need. Blocked an immediate family member or close friend. Neglected your body. No kink, tattoos, or piercings. Questioned your version of events after being questioned by a family member, colleague, or friend. Formed ulcers, fibroids, cysts, or had other gastrointestinal issues. Considered that these symptoms may only exist in your head. Been harmed by another person, not including institutions or systems. Found yourself calling for your grandmother. Woke up and said, fuck all this. Had a visible breakdown. Please attach documentation. Um, let's see, I'm gonna pivot a little bit. This poem is after My Love and Mick Powell, and it's called Rock the Boat is a song about strapping, which is after a song by Aaliyah called Rock the Boat. Rock the Boat is a song about strapping. According to my pastor, who I, like a fool, mistook for the voice of God, calling me by name. Of course, strapping was too vulgar a term for her holy mouth, though she called Aaliyah everything but her name, and me funny for watching a woman dancing with women, their bodies whisper close, not a man in sight. I want to name that I'm embarrassed to tell you this. I let the knife of her stare stop my hips from rocking, nodded as she named my litany of sins, unnatural, ungodly. In my own home, I changed the channel. There is a name for the type of lie I told with my mouth closed, for what I pretended to not know as clearly as my own name. Hmm. I'm going to read one more Ice Camp poem and then like two new poems. Ice Cam, Little Caesars Arena, February 2023. Now that grief lays her hand on my cheek, curves into my chest, lover, child, a ghost bearing the face of my grandmother. Now that we are close enough to greet by first name, I look out at the sea of jewelry and see how a game can be a memorial, how the body becomes an altar, rows and rows of gold pendants, thick as fists, gripping portraits of beloveds. This grief, heavy, wrapped around our throats. Oh, how it makes us casket sharp, so flashy, the camera can't bear to look away. Um, okay, so I've been writing a lot about grief. Actually, it has become quite the companion. Not, not the fun kind, but a companion nonetheless. So I've been trying to be transparent and reading poems about grief since that's what I'm writing a lot about. Grief and adornment and beauty and our rituals around those things and how they all kind of, blend in together. So I figured I said I was going to read a couple. Well, I mean, I'm gonna read three. It's not quite a couple, but the first one is about Aretha, Detroit legend. Um, Detroit legend, bad bitch extraordinaire. It's called Dressing the Body. We, Detroit girls, daughters of Motown, knew before we saw the bronze casket that Aretha would be dressed down. Some, non-believers, outsiders, called it frivolous, 2-day viewing, 8-hour long service, 4 outfit changes, each dress more elaborate than the last. Beautiful, beautiful gowns, accessorized from jewels to pointed heels. I half expect her to break out a side eye, belt out a hymn to remind us who the queen is. There is, of course, no such performance, though we all huddle like crows, waiting to see if she still looks like herself. There is a protocol to this, a right way to send someone back to the lap of God, wearing their Sunday best, so dressed up they can be mistaken for a bride. And these next two poems are about my granny, who I lost almost 2 years ago, which is bananas. This is what it's time. A figment means nothing, 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 I say. Before the service, that night, the city closed its blinds and left us to fend for ourselves against the harsh snow, the thunder applauding the sky. I imagine my grandmother watching from across that thin veil, fit for a bride. She's the reason the storm didn't swipe my car off the road on the way to the emergency braid appointment after the first braider lost power in her booth. I had to beg for this slot. Same day, late evening, snow flooding the street. On a different night, I might have tried to tame my own roots, but how could I chance a failed twist out, a poofed out pressing curl? My granny girl watching from the altar as I walked into her funeral unkempt. I couldn't bear to fail her in that way, looking unloved, messing up her good name. I know my granny loved me down, would have bent that roaring sky and came back home to me, if only, if only. Um, so one of it's gonna sound morbid, but it's not morbid. Okay, work with me here. So one of the things I spend a lot of time doing since I lost my granny is thinking about all the things that she now has access to, like on the other side of the veil that she didn't have access to before. Um, and some of them are things that I'm like, oh, this is endearing. Now you know how much I think about you, all those things. And some of them are horrifying, like, oh my God, there's business of mine that I do not want you to see. And what if you're really up there seeing it all? So this poem is kind of about grief, kind of about love. Yeah. It's called Watching Over Me. 1. It made sense not to tell her then. By the end, she was a child. By the end, I was a different type of mother. Every day, a new negotiation. Can you take a bite of your food for me? Could you swallow your pills? Let the nurse draw your blood. Granny, I'm going to lift you now. Help change your cloths, your clothes. Rub your legs, your feet. Tell me where it hurts. If you try, I will give you more Pepsi, more ice cream. If you try, I will. 2. Our second date was to an art installation. In an upstairs bedroom, we were prompted to leave an encouraging note for future guests to see. The prompt stretches in our fingers. Across the room from one another, we write the same Audre Lorde quote. I am deliberate and afraid of nothing. That was more than 2 years ago when we planned to be casual, when neither of us picked up the phone for weeks, when our grandmothers were earthside and not yet pictures on our dressers. 3. I joked with Ajanae once that my granny crossed over and learned more about me than she bargained for. I'm not sure how that works. If she peeks across the veil and frowns when she sees that girl seated on my lap. If death snitched on the one secret I kept from her in life. It no longer matters that I was a coward, that I half hinted once and never brought it up again, that I brought it up knowing she couldn't remember. 4. That was then. Now I would tell her 10 times every day if it meant she died knowing who loved me. Granny, while I'm sleeping, she kisses my shoulders. She loved her mama and loved me enough to hide me from her. She brought me a tiny jade elephant to remind me of you in those first months when grief tried to kill me and I almost let it. Granny, I walk into her room and see the book I dedicated to you lying next to her pillow. The end. Thank y'all.
Brittany, my good Lord, those were amazing.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, yeah, good Lord, I was saying the same thing. I was like, you recall, like, you're on the other show thing I host, and like I was saying how much I wanted you to have a book out, and now you've got a book out, and now you're
That's
writing.
bananas.
But now I want the next book. Like you just read some new stuff that I want that in my hands too. You
Oh,
need to slow
thank you. That
down.
means a lot.
That was incredible. Thank you so much. And like no exaggeration, for anybody in the room who is not familiar with Brittany's work, I really think I honestly hope Good Dress is up for like all the awards. I don't know how awards work in this world. I really don't like, but I really do think the book should be up for many, if not all of them. It's outstanding. And shout out to Tin House. Like again, anybody in the room, if you don't have
They be
it,
eating. Okay, 10
that book,
houses. I
like
love them.
like the physical memento of the book, like it's a marvelously gorgeous design, like inside color, like it's a gorgeous
Thank you.
piece of art.
They've been an amazing press. They've been
I'm
an
sure. I'm sure. We will move into questions here in a second, but I also want to give one other shout out. Like you were also both just amazing readers. Like I love your work. Like the poems are amazing, but it's also just such a damn treat to sit back and listen to you two read your work. It's
Thank
not surprised that half the room has it on like while they're cooking and stuff. Like, yeah, I want to hear that while I'm
you.
making curry. Shout out back to Kevin. Kevin was one making curry, right? Did I get that right? All right, folks. Feel free to drop questions in the chat. I'm gonna throw a question at these two though, just to kind of get us started, and then we'll have like 5 or 6 minutes here or something like that. So feel free to pipe up with other questions as well. But I'm gonna play the kind of, it's not really behind the scenes. If you listen to the Versus podcast, you know this, I guess. But you all, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you met at the Inside Out literary program in Detroit, which for our non-Detroiters in the room is we got a lot of teachers in the room, which is why I wanted to ask this question. It's a literary arts program for students, to encourage, K-12 students to write their behinds off. So I just want to throw one question at you too. Like, how you've been friends for so long, what role did Inside Out play in that? Like, how did y'all meet? But then also, like, what made Inside Out so powerful? Like, how did that experience of being able to write as a kid lead you to where you are now, like friendship wise and professional writer, poet wise? Does that make sense? Terribly worded, but I think you get the idea.
That makes sense. Bess, you want to go first or you want me to go first?
We can tag team it. I love telling our love story. Um, So, me and Brittany met through Inside Out Literary Arts Project, which you already explained the program. And I was a really bratty, annoying teenager. And I did a poem. I think about my mom actually while I'm reading all these mom poems. And actually don't remember if it was about my mom. I think it was another poem, but I did a poem, ran
It
off
was that poem.
stage, ran off stage, very dramatic, crying. And Brittany was like, so nobody's gonna check on that child? I'll check on it.
Oh, and on my end, I was a very bossy, like single mother. I had no time for nonsense. And I was like, who is this insufferable child just crying?
Sick of
Um,
me.
so for a long while we were more like mentor mentee. And then one day we looked up and I was like, wow, that's my best friend. And then one day we looked up and I was like, oh, that's the love of my life. I'm never leaving her ever, ever, ever. And I think that Inside Out made a lot of space for that to be possible because it gave us so much time to just write and think about ourselves as writers. Um, and I credit them a lot for helping me to see myself as a professional before I really knew like how valuable that was. Like they had us teaching workshops. So I'm like
Yes.
22 driving up to the juvenile center, like, okay, and check out your poems today. Um, and yeah, they're just really helpful.
Yeah, and I'm gonna second that heavy. That I think I taught my first workshop when I was like 16 or 17. And I will also say because at the time slam was so big and national slams were so big, um, and you could kind of it's hard to say that poetry is ever really lucrative, right? But if there was going to be something that was lucrative that involved young people, it was going to be slam,
Mhm.
because people were very invested in this like kind of performative, right, endeavor. The kind of young people that it drew, and Inside Out um, didn't teach us how to slam. It taught us how to be writers. And I actually was just having this conversation with Erica Foreman, who, if you don't know her work, brilliant writer, but Inside Out um, really emphasized like that you are a writer, and that not that you can't work on performance and that performance doesn't get developed, but a lot of our performance stuff was like us developing it amongst each other. Because when we came to Inside Out, we were meeting at the library to write, to read. Like I think about the poets they were bringing in, Nate Marshall, Rachel McKibbins. We didn't know what we had. Okay, we
We
didn't know
were
what he
so
had.
spoiled, so
Spoiled,
lucky.
okay. And so I shout them out for being very invested in our work as artists. And they were like, yeah, we're gonna throw you into these performance spaces and like y'all need to be practicing. But if you come here, you're gonna write and you're gonna read and you're gonna be able to critically consider work. And yeah, shout out to Inside Out.
Gang, gang.
No, they're amazing, and I love that they got one of those. There are good-hearted rich people out there, like Jeff Bezos's ex. Like, obviously made one mistake, but then she flipped around and used her wealth to donate and gave. Inside Out got one of those last year, and those
Mhm.
are like
Yeah.
no strings grants. They're like the kind of grants that every nonprofit wants, right? Like I don't need to waste my time on forms. Like just give me the money to go do cool stuff. And so they're expanding and doing all sorts of great stuff, and you love to see it. I'm going to throw it. Majda, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question? You got a great question in the chat.
Oh my gosh. Okay, fine. Put me on the spot. I was thinking about, first of all, beautiful. I'm so moved over here. Honestly, I'm practically speechless. Thank you for the reading tonight. My question is, to how to be so vulnerable on the page. I find that I self-edit a lot when I write, Because again, I'm thinking, I guess, about relatives that are just going to be like not thrilled by what they're going to see on the page, whether they're here in this form or elsewhere. So just curious. Thanks.
You want to
Um,
go?
yeah. I'm not gonna say I forget about them because that's not true. Um, I do think that I've developed like a ethical code for myself, and I think as long as I feel like I'm meeting that ethical code, then I try not to worry about what other people are thinking about because I know that I'm being like ethical. I only tell parts of stories that are my parts of the story to tell. I make sure that I'm like, okay, I'm not projecting onto anybody. I'm not assuming how they felt. I'm not like, assuming feelings or circumstances. I'm really centering myself in my feelings. And that's something that I feel very passionate about. Like, can't nobody take my feelings from me and can't nobody beat my ass about how I feel. Um, so that's usually kind of like my mantra. I also don't once the poem out in the world, I'm really not talking to people about it. It's there. I wrote it. So, you know, it's easy. It's a whole lot easier for me to be vulnerable on the page than it is for me to be vulnerable in real life because I make it a practice to not have to justify or like explain what I wrote to anybody. Even like with my mom, I was really nervous about her response to the book, and I wrote her a nice long letter, and I sent her the book early in advance, and then was like, "Okay, do with that what you will." Now, and we haven't talked about it again because I wrote what I wrote. Um, that you wanna.
Um, yeah, I can add to that. So, um, I have completely abandoned in my writing process, um, thinking or thinking about an audience while I'm writing. And I guess maybe not completely abandoned, but I decide that I choose to be an ethic and like think about my ethics and think about my boundaries in revision. So I can be like my most vulnerable, my most problematic self on the page, like because I'm like me just putting it on the page does not make it something that the world will see. And I realized that I was self-editing so much because I had a big issue with self-editing. I realized I was self-editing so much that I couldn't even get to like the work that was important. And every time I started touching something that felt a little scary, I'd be like, yeah, nah, not that one, because I don't know how. I'm already thinking about the conversation I'm gonna have next Thanksgiving at the dinner table. It's too much. Or I'm thinking like fearfully about being afraid of making a mistake, being afraid of handling a topic poorly, that I feel like is sensitive. And that was really, really harmful to my writing process. And I found myself writing less and less. And so I was very much so like, yeah, I can actually say the really crazy thing in the craziest way that I want to say it on the page. And then when I come back tomorrow, I could be like, all right, Ajane, do you actually feel comfortable sharing this publicly? Is this even in line with your values? Like, is this touching on a boundary or an ethic? Are you the person that needs to be saying this? Even if you do feel like it's true, do you need to be saying this in this moment? So reserving the kind of what are my boundaries and what are my ethics questions for revision, and letting drafting be a free for all. My drafts look crazy. Almost no one has access to my drafts because of it, to my like very first drafts. Brittany's probably the only person who sees the like earliest versions of my drafts. And even then I'd be like, I'm gonna put the next draft in the document because I
You
said
do.
something that I don't know if anybody needs to know that part.
You do.
There we go. Sorry about that. Awesome. Well, you all, those are fantastic answers. I love that, by the way. And both are like, I feel like combining those too, like just let it all out and let your words speak for themselves, but then like revise. I think that's like very sage advice, piggybacking off each other there. That is pretty much perfect. We are over time, so we will wrap it up here. But again, I want to just give you just a massive thank you one more time for making the time to do this tonight and sharing your words and your work, your process, a little behind the scenes there at the end too. So thank you, Ajane and Brittany, for being here tonight.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here, and thank you, Mitch, for having us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, everybody. Thank you for being in the audience. We will see you next time. We have another one of these in March. I should know off the top of my head who's up. Check our socials. It'll be out there. Peace and love, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.